character,
Yeah,
right?
Boston mob boss.
That's the whole 9 yards. Brutal guy. But what if I told you that this deep dive isn't really about his crimes, but more about an ethical dilemma that could happen to anyone, even a guy like Bulger?
Wow.
So, get this. Our source material today is a newsletter from a guy named David Vogel. He's a retired CEO, LinkedIn influencer, founder of the Church of Unity Society, something like that.
Oh, wow.
And he uses Bulger's death to kind of make us think about, like, justice and retaliation and even forgiveness.
Really?
So, yeah, we're diving into some seriously murky waters with this one. It's
I'm intrigued.
It's a tough one.
So what's he saying? What's the point?
Yeah, so Vogel's point is that we need to think long and hard about whether it's ever okay to manipulate a system to punish someone, even if they're a terrible person.
I see.
And what does that say about us if we do that? You know?
That's a deep question.
It is.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, Bulger was as bad as they come.
We know.
Vogel doesn't shy away from the details. I mean, we're talking extortion, racketeering, murder.
Yeah.
He even describes the horrific state of some of the victims' bodies.
I bet.
It was, I mean, this wasn't just violence. It was meant to send a message.
Right, to really drive it home.
Yeah.
So where does the ethical dilemma come in?
Right. So that's what makes this so fascinating, because even if you believe that someone like Bulger deserves punishment, you know, what happens when the system itself becomes the punisher?
Right.
So Bulger gets convicted, imprisoned, you know, the whole deal.
Yeah.
But even behind bars, he's a problem.
Okay.
Verbally abusive to staff.
That sort of thing. So they transfer him
to
USP Hazelton.
USP Hazelton.
Ever heard of it?
No.
It's got a nickname.
Okay.
Misery Mountain.
Wow.
It's notoriously violent history of inmate deaths.
Jeez.
And that's where Vogel's argument gets interesting.
Okay.
He says that they sent Bulger there for verbally abusing staff.
Right.
Not for any violent act or escape attempt or anything like that. The guy was 89 and in a wheelchair.
Oh, geez.
So but they basically sent him to a place where he was almost guaranteed to die.
Wow.
It's pretty unsettling, you know, even if Bulger was
that's cold.
The worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And Vogel even mentions that the inmates at Hazelton were excited about Bulger's arrival, like taking bets on how long he would survive.
Yeah, man.
Does anyone deserve that?
Yeah. No, I see your point. So he's saying even if
Bulger was a terrible person. Yeah. Like sending him there was basically a death sentence.
Right. And if we condone this because we hate Bulger, then where do we draw the line?
Exactly.
What's to stop the system from doing it to other people? People who maybe haven't committed such heinous crimes.
Right. Yeah, it's like the power of the prison system itself is the weapon, you know.
It's really disturbing when you think about it.
It is.
So, okay, we've got this notoriously violent prison.
Right.
We've got this notorious mob boss. Yeah. And this system that seems to have deliberately put him in harm's way.
Yeah.
But then Vogel throws a real curveball.
What's that?
He starts talking about forgiveness.
Forgiveness for Bulger.
Yeah, it's not about condoning Bulger's actions, but about recognizing that holding on to anger and the desire for revenge only hurts us. You know, it's a very Christian perspective, you know, rooted in that idea of turning the other cheek.
Yeah, I get that.
And he even provides these practical steps for responding to hate with love.
Interesting.
Like pausing before reacting, setting boundaries, even praying.
Right.
And he tells this incredible story about the Amish community forgiving the man who killed their children in a school shooting.
Oh, wow.
It's unbelievable.
That's powerful.
It's a powerful example of how forgiveness can break the cycle of violence.
Yeah.
Even in the face of unimaginable tragedy.
I can see that.
You know?
Yeah.
It speaks to this deeper need to find a way to live with pain and loss without letting it consume us.
Absolutely.
But let's not forget about the Bureau of Prisons.
Right, the BOP.
The BOP. Vogel argues that they failed ethically.
I see.
Here.
Okay.
That they prioritized retaliation
over inmate safety.
Right. And he's saying that they knew, or they should have known, that Hazelton was dangerous.
Yeah, and he points out that this wasn't an isolated incident.
Oh.
Hazelton had other deaths, suggesting that Bulger's case might be part of a larger systemic problem.
I see. So sending him there seems less about justice and more about kind of a message.
Like, don't mess with us.
Yeah.
To other inmates, maybe.
Exactly.
It gets you thinking about the ripple effects of something like this. What kind of message does this send to other potential informants?
Right.
Or even just to the prison population as a whole.
It really speaks to this potential culture of fear and silence within the prison system.
Yeah.
Like, when people are afraid to speak up, that's when corruption can really take hold.
It's a breeding ground for more problems.
Exactly. So we've got this really complex situation with ethical questions swirling around like a whirlpool.
Yeah.
And we're left with this uneasy feeling, like, even if Bulger was a monster, did he deserve this?
Right.
And what does that say about a system that allows this to happen?
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of discomfort I think Vogel wants us to feel.
Right? Yeah.
It makes us look at our own reactions to wrongdoing.
Exactly.
And ask ourselves some tough questions, like, do we want a world where people are punished outside of the justice system, even if we think they deserve it?
Right. This isn't just about Bulger anymore, is it?
No.
It's about all of us.
Right.
And the kind of world we want to live in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a much bigger question.
It really is.
Than just one man.
It is.
Really makes you question what justice truly means, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we have this legal system, but then we have these actions that seem to operate outside of it.
Right. And what's interesting is that Vogel argues that the BOP might have actually hurt themselves by orchestrating Bulger's demise.
How so?
Well, remember, Bulger was an FBI informant for years.
Yeah.
He knew a lot of dirty secrets, had information about corruption within the agency.
Yeah.
So Vogel suggests that by silencing Bulger, they also silenced a potential source of valuable intelligence.
Interesting. So it's not just ethically questionable, but also potentially strategically foolish.
Yeah.
Like, they were so focused on revenge that they missed an opportunity to uncover even more wrongdoing.
It makes you think about the long game, right?
Yeah.
If they had played it differently, maybe they could have used Bulger to clean up some of the corruption that he helped create.
Right.
It's like they chose the short-term win that might have cost them in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. Vogel, he also brings up another kind of chilling point.
Yeah.
He says that Bulger's death wasn't just about punishment.
Right.
It was about sending a message.
What kind of message do you think the BOP was trying to send? And to whom?
I think it was a message to anyone who might consider crossing them, whether it's inmates or potential informants, or even people within their own ranks.
Yeah.
It's a way of saying, look what happens to people who mess with us.
Which creates a culture of fear, where people are afraid to speak up or challenge authority, which can lead to even more corruption.
Exactly. Yeah.
Vogel argues that this kind of unchecked power undermines the very foundation of a just society. So what can we do about it?
Well, for starters, we need to be aware of the problem.
Yeah.
We can't fix what we don't acknowledge.
Right.
We need to, ask questions, demand transparency from those in power, and be willing to challenge the status quo.
And Vogel also reminds us that forgiveness can be powerful.
Right.
Not in the sense of condoning wrongdoing.
Right, of course.
But in terms of freeing ourselves from the cycle of anger and revenge.
Yeah.
It's about choosing a different path, one that leads to healing and understanding.
He gives some compelling examples, like the Amish community we discussed earlier.
Yeah, they didn't just forgive the man who murdered their children.
Right.
They showed compassion to his family as well.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
It is.
Such a profound act of empathy and forgiveness.
It highlights this potential for even the most horrific acts to be met with something other than hatred and violence.
It really makes you think about how we react to wrongdoing in our own lives, even on a much smaller scale.
Yeah.
Do we seek revenge, or do we seek understanding?
Right.
Do we hold on to anger, or do we try to find a way to move forward?
Vogel's newsletter definitely pushes you to examine your own moral compass. Yeah. It's not always easy, right? Especially when you're dealing with someone like Bulger who caused so much pain and suffering. But maybe there's a lesson there for all of us, even if it's just a reminder that everyone is capable of both good and evil.
Absolutely. And that even in the face of darkness, there's always the possibility of choosing a different path.
Right.
One that leads to light and healing. Yeah. It's about recognizing that we all make mistakes. Yeah. And that everyone deserves a chance at redemption.
It's a powerful message.
It is.
And one that I think we can all apply to our own lives, regardless of our religious beliefs.
But what about the victims in all this?
Right.
You know, Vogel doesn't really delve into their perspective.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is often framed as something that benefits the person being forgiven.
Right.
But what about the people who were hurt?
Exactly.
Their pain and suffering are real.
Absolutely.
And their feelings absolutely matter.
Absolutely. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to dealing with trauma and loss.
Right.
Some victims may find solace in forgiveness, while others may need years, even a lifetime, to process their pain and anger.
And that's okay. There's no right or wrong way to heal.
Exactly. But I think what Vogel is trying to say is that even if we can't forgive the perpetrator, we can still choose not to be consumed by hatred and bitterness.
Because ultimately those emotions only hurt us in the end. That keep us trapped in the past and prevent us from moving forward. Yeah. It's about finding a way to live with the pain without letting it define us.
And that's a journey that each of us has to make in our own way.
So where does that leave us? We've got this tragic story, this ethical dilemma, this call for forgiveness. What's the takeaway for our listeners?
I think the key message here is that we all have a choice in how we respond to wrongdoing.
Right.
We can choose anger and retaliation, or we can choose compassion and understanding. It's not always easy.
Right.
But it's a choice that can have a profound impact, not just on our own lives, but on the world around us.
And that brings us back to Bulger. He was convicted, imprisoned, and ultimately met a violent end. Was that justice served?
That's a question each listener will have to answer for themselves. There's no easy answer and no way to know for sure what Bulger deserved.
But what we can say is that his death raises some uncomfortable questions about our own attitudes towards justice and punishment. It forces us to confront the darker side of human nature, both in ourselves and in the systems we create.
Absolutely.
And it challenges us to think critically about how we want to live in a world where justice is often elusive and forgiveness can feel impossible.
It's a heavy topic.
It is.
But one that's worth grappling with.
Because ultimately, it's not just about Whitey Bulger. It's about all of us and the kind of world we want to create for ourselves and for future generations.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
From the specifics of Bulger's case to these ethical implications of his death, the complexities of forgiveness.
Right.
But I guess I keep coming back to this question of how does this connect to the everyday listener?
Right.
You know, you're probably not dealing with mob bosses or navigating the intricacies of the prison system.
Right, right.
So what's the takeaway here?
I think that's where it gets really personal. Yeah. You know, what happened to Bulger forces us to confront our own reactions to wrongdoing. Do we crave retaliation? Do we believe in forgiveness? These are questions that are worth pondering, regardless of what we might think of Bulger himself.
Right. It's like Vogel's holding up a mirror to our own sense of morality. Yeah. You know?
If we were in the BOP's shoes, knowing what we know about Hazelton, would we make the same call?
Yeah. Would we be able to resist that temptation?
Right.
To use the system to punish someone we believe deserves it?
Exactly. Exactly. It's a tough question, and it forces us to confront our own capacity for both compassion and cruelty.
Yeah.
We like to think of ourselves as good people.
Right.
But how do we react when we're wronged?
Yeah.
You know? Do we seek revenge? Do we hold on to that anger and resentment?
And remember, Vogel's not advocating for being a doormat.
No, of course not.
He's not saying we should let people just walk all over us.
Right. He emphasizes setting healthy boundaries.
Right.
Forgiveness doesn't mean condoning bad behavior or allowing someone to continue hurting you. It's about it's about finding a way to move forward without being consumed by that anger and resentment.
He also makes it clear that forgiveness isn't a one-time thing. It's a process.
A journey.
It can take time.
Absolutely.
Sometimes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy.
No.
Sometimes it takes tremendous strength to forgive.
Yeah.
Especially when those wounds are deep and the pain is raw.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier said than done.
It is. But Vogel believes that ultimately forgiveness is the path to true healing, both for ourselves and for our community.
Absolutely. It's about breaking free from that cycle of violence and creating a more just and compassionate world.
Yeah, so Vogel ends his newsletter with this challenge, and I think it's one that we should all take to heart, regardless of whether we're religious or not.
Yeah.
He asks us to imagine a world where mercy triumphs over vengeance. A world where we refuse to let hatred dictate our actions.
Yeah, it's a powerful vision.
It is.
And it's one worth striving for.
It definitely leaves you with a lot
to
think about. And there's this one question that keeps coming back to me.
Yeah.
A question that wasn't directly addressed in the source material. What if Bulger had apologized? What if he had expressed remorse for his actions and genuinely sought forgiveness?
Yeah.
Would that have changed anything? Does the victim's attitude matter in how we judge the morality of the situation?
That's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
Right.
It really gets to the heart of what forgiveness means and the role it plays in our understanding of justice. It forces us to consider whether forgiveness is something we offer unconditionally, or whether it's contingent on the other person's actions and attitudes.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And I think that's the power of this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
It's not about giving you all the answers.
Yeah.
It's about prompting you to ask the right questions. Questions about your own beliefs, your own biases, and your own capacity for both compassion and cruelty.
Because ultimately, the story of Whitey Bulger is a reflection of our own humanity.
Yeah.
It's a story about the choices we make in the face of injustice and suffering. And it's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, we always have a choice. We can choose anger and revenge, or we can choose forgiveness and understanding.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder those questions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.